Chavre, how are you? Afreiliche Chanukah. Today is Erev Shabbos Kodesh Pashas Mikeitz. It's a big Shabbos. There's 3 Sifrei Torah. It's a Shabbos Rosh Chodesh, it's a Shabbos Mikeitz, or it's a Shabbos Chanukah. So obviously, the question is, like the Rebbe trained us, we have to learn the lessons and what is the connection between Tevis, Chodesh Tevis, Pashas Mikeitz, and Chanukah. But before we get to that, let's start with a prayer, and that's the pasuk, the first pasuk in Kapitel Kuf Lamed Gimel. Shiramayles LeDavid, Hine ma tovu ma noyim, Sheves achim gam yochad. This is a song by David HaMelech. Behold how good and how pleasing is the dwelling of brothers, especially together. Rashi says, over here, that Hine matov manoim shevesachem gam yochad is referring to Yoshev HaKadosh Baruch Hu bebeis habchira im Yisrael hakriim achem v'reim. That it says an amazing statement about Bnei Yisrael that we're like Hashem's brothers and Hashem's friend. And this is, in a way, Hashem, and the Pasuk is speaking about how amazing it is when the Eibishter is in the Beis HaMikdash together with the Yidden. But then there's also the simple meaning. Hine matoivu manoyim sheves achim gam yochad. When there's achdus, when there's unity, when there's a strong family unit and all the brothers are ba'achdus, and it goes on Gans Klal Yisrael when everyone is ba'achdus and there's unity. And this brings us to this week's Parsha. And this is a subject we're going to speak about today. First, I want to beg forgiveness. It's very, very late, and there's not really time over here in Melbourne. So we're going to have to speak very short points. It's not usually my style. I like to focus more on one thing, but we'll speak some general points. So, in this week's Parsha, we have the beginning of the high drama of the story with Yosef and his brothers that everyone knows about, that started already last week. 2 weeks ago, when he sold in Parshas Vayeshev, they sell him, and then comes Mikeitz, and then comes Vayigash. Last week's Parsha starts the story. And in this week's Parsha, it seems that Yosef puts his brothers through the ringer. He accuses them of being spies. First he imprisons Shimon, then he lets Shimon go, then he tells them they have to bring Binyamin, etc., as is well known the story. So what we first have to understand, before we proceed further, because many people ask the question, the obvious question, and this is what all the Mefarshim speak about, and all the Rishonim, and all in Maimar Razal, is that it seems that Yosef is treating them harshly. He's going to cause them much anguish, much anxiety, and dissatisfaction and pain, etc., as we see in this week's Parsha. So why would Yosef do it? And the actual story is the opposite. Yosef is doing them a kindness. As the Alter Rebbe brings at the end of chapter 12, Lilmeid mi Yosef im Echov. Yosef forgives them completely. I think we spoke about it many times. The idea of reframing comes from Yosef and his brothers. Very much so, this concept. So I don't want to elaborate again. So the Zohar says we learn from Yosef how to forgive. He's not taking revenge at all, far from it, the opposite. He's doing them a favor. And what's the favor? Basically, he wants them to come to tshuva from their own accord. And the only way to come to tshuva is to experience similar experiences and to act differently. Only when a person, like the Rambam says, goes through the same thing again and acts differently, then we know he does tshuva. So Yosef is doing him a favor, doing them, his brothers, a favor to bring them to tshuva. And so too, we see this from many psukim. There's the famous pasuk in Shir Hashirim where it says, Mi yitnecha ka'achli. We turn to the Eibishter and we say that he should be like a brother to us. We are like Yosef's brothers, according to one pshat, and we say that the Eibishter should treat us like Yosef treated the brothers, that he took care of them in the end, and he forgave them. So we're seeing it totally as a virtue, as the act of a tzaddik. He could have goaded them, he could have tortured them. You see how you made fun of me? etc., etc. He didn't do any of that whatsoever. What he did was, he made them go through an experience where they taka did tshuva before they disrespected a brother and they treated a brother wrong. And over here, he wanted to bring out their Mesiras Nefesh for a brother. So we see that from the Pasuk Miyit Chaka'achli, that we turn to Hashem, they should treat us like Yosef treated his brothers. There's also Noé Ketzoin Yosef. Yosef is seen as the one who takes care of his brothers, looks after them, feeds them, etc., etc. So Yosef is seen only as something which is a positive thing. Now, there's a Maimah from the Rebbe, Maimah Malukot Chelik Hey, where the Rebbe goes into this idea of Miyit Chaka'achli, which I don't want to elaborate on that because that's more the negative, which means that it's a comparison because we have to first understand, when we say this pasuk, Miyit Chaka'achli, we're turning to Hashem and we're saying, even though we do the wrong thing sometimes, everyone knows that they're not perfect, and we have to realize that we did something wrong, we still turn to Hashem and we say, just like Yosef forgave his brothers, even though they did him wrong, so too asking you to forgive us, even though we do something wrong. But the Rebbe explains in that Maimer, it's Sefer Memorah Malukot Hey, the Maimer, Daber el Kol Hadas B'nai Yisrael Kedoshim, Tavshin Chaf Aleph. Over there, the Rebbe explains what was the sin. So the sin is, number one, the idea that you take a soul and it's wasting time. It's not able to focus on its shlichus. If Yosef's in prison, so then he's not doing what he's meant to be doing. He's locked up. And then there's another aspect of the sin, as we'll soon see in the words of Ruvain, that we didn't listen to his cries, even when Yosef was begging, etc. And we saw how he's in pain, we ignored him. And that's another aspect. The Eibishter sends every single person, Kol Deidi Deifek, a person has his Nefesh Elikis, which is reminding him, do the right thing, and you ignore it. And this is the point. The person has to know he's here on a mission. You're here for a reason. The only reason you're in this world is to do the mission. And when a person is ignoring the mission and he's wasting time, so then he lost the plot. Number one, wasting time, not doing what the Eibishter wants. And worse than that, he's ignoring the pleas and the messages. He's not listening to the signs, looking for the signs that the Eibishter is giving him to help him out, to be able to get out of the matzah, whatever he's in. So see that Maimer in Chelik Hey Malukot where it speaks about that aspect. Now I want to talk about a Sicha the Rebbe in Chelik Lamed, which is an amazing Sicha, and what the Rebbe speaks about, the famous Klotz Kasha, and all the Mefarshim talk about this too, where the pasuk says as follows: after Yosef starts treating them harshly and accuses them of spies, so then the brothers spoke between themselves. Vayemru ishal ochiv, avol Hashem emanachnu. Indeed, we are guilty. Alachinu, concerning our brother. Asherinu tzaras nafshay. We saw his heartfelt anguish. Behischanenu eleinu, when he pleaded with us. V'lo shamaynu, and we didn't listen. Like we said before, the comparison, Miyit Chaka'achli, we're turning to the Eibishter, that our sin is like the brother's sin to Yosef. We ignore Hashem's messages. Al kein bo'eleinu atzor hazayis. That's why this anguish has come upon us. And then it says, Vayan Ruven Oisam Leimer, Hali Amarti Aleichem Leimer, Al Techtu Beyeled, V'lo Shemaitim. V'gam Domoi, Hinei Nidrush. So Ruven spoke up to them saying, did I not speak to you saying, do not sin against the boy? But you would not listen, and his blood as well, behold, is being avenged. So everyone has the kasha over here. What's very, very annoying in life? Everyone knows, educators, parents, teachers are told that when the child or the student has made a mistake, did something that was unwise. For example, mommy told you to walk outside with a coat because it's raining outside and you didn't, and you caught a cold and you became sick. So mommy is not supposed to tell the boy, see, I told you so. The worst thing a person wants to hear when he did something wrong was, I told you so. It's bad enough he's the one that's sick. Now you're going to tell him, I told you so. You wait a week, 2, 3, come to him later and say, you know what? We have to learn a lesson from everything. I was hit by a car 32 years ago or something like that. Anyways, people came to visit me in the hospital. So one of the rabbis, I asked, so what's the Hira in Avedis Hashem? What lesson should I take from the fact that I was hit by a car? So he answered me, the first Hira you have to take is they have to be very careful when you cross the street. Okay, I'm not saying I disagreed with him, but I'm just saying that was the first thing he said. Obviously, I wasn't looking. And I didn't notice, and I went the wrong way. I didn't cross by a light, whatever the story is. So what's going on over here? Yosef is now digging into them. It's bad enough they're going through this ordeal and the suffering. Now Reuven is saying, see, I told you so and you didn't listen to me. Why is Reuven saying this now? So the Rebbe in Eseicha and Chelik Lamed says 2 moedike points which teach us about life and about changing and growth and development. The first point Reuven is making is that in the words of the brothers, they say, Al kein boileinu hatzara azois. So what are they regretting? They're regretting it for the wrong reasons, because they're not having a good time. So because they suffered, chas v'shalom, I'm not saying it's that bad, but like the person says about a certain crime that he did, the only thing I regret is that I got caught. Chas v'shalom, we're talking about tzaddikim, but we're talking about Reuven heard their words and he said, Al kein bo'aleinu hatzara azois. They're talking about themselves and they're focusing, therefore this problem happened to us. So Reuven is saying, no. Al techtu bayele. The stress has to be what you did to the other person. Don't focus on what's going on with you, that now it's not working out, things are not working out, and you're going through a terrible time. No, we have to think about the thing itself. And what was the thing itself? We wronged Yosef. Al techtu bayele. That's point A. So it's a lesson in life concerning every time that we shouldn't think about consequences and reward or punishment when it comes to doing something that was wrong, because that's still thinking in an immature way. That means you really didn't grow up. That means you really didn't do tshuva. If we're talking about real tshuva, it's about right or wrong. Is the thing right or was the thing wrong? And that's what you have to think about. And that means you do tshuva. And the second thing Reuven wanted to bring out, which this is the number one rule in life, is it has to start with taking ownership. In other words, admit you made the wrong choice. You have to get up and say, I made a wrong choice. It wasn't a smart choice. And I take full responsibility for it, and I will not do it again. And that's why Reuven tells them over here, Halei amarti aleichem. So you can't say that if only somebody would have convinced me, and if only somebody would have spoken to me, and if only somebody showed me the other side of the coin. No, we did. I was there. And I told you guys this is not the right thing to do. And still you did it. So that's the beginning of tshuva. Tshuva means that you recognize that you did something wrong and you have to fix it. And this comes to another major point that the Rebbe spoke once by a Fabrengen. And this is all the Mefarshim talk about it. That how does this discussion go over here? Right? And this is another major lesson. Vayemru ishel ochiv avol Hashem emanachnu. What's the Jewish way? What's the Chassidish way? That whenever there's a person who's experiencing something in life, the first thing you have to look at is the pnimiyus onyonim. Why is this happening? It's all about the Eibishter. If you cross the street and you got hit by a car, it's not because you didn't look in the right direction. That's also true. You have to do things b'derech hateva. But first you have to look at what it says over here. Just like by Yes's brothers. They said, why is this whole thing going on? We're being jailed. We're having trouble with customs. We're having trouble with passports. They're accusing us. Why? Hashem emanachnu. They look deep inside themselves, and right away they're looking at how they could do tshuva. Seheb tzachon von sich. Every single time when something's going wrong, you have to look deep inside yourself and think about your connection with the Eibishter and think how to fix that connection. And that's the main lesson over here. These words from the Torah that are very, very famous, and all the Mefarshim talk about it. And they say the same thing is true, Bichlal, when it comes to Tachnun. We start off by saying that it's our fault. And we have to look at ourselves and see how we could rectify it. And Einon has upon him to think that it's because of anything else. Now, we said, one second. So Yosef makes them go through this whole experience, and they do tshuva. This was the beginning of the tshuva, right over here, when they say these words, Aval Hashem Anachnu. And then he had to take the experience further and further to come to the climax where Yosef and his brothers are ready to go, where Yehuda and the brothers are ready to go on Mesilas Nefesh Mamish for a brother. Here they sold the brother, and here comes the contrast, the full tshuva that they're ready to go on Mesilas Nefesh. But very, very interestingly, later, and by the way, also later we see when the brothers say to Yosef, Yorad Yaradnu, we had indeed come down. And Rashi over here says a very interesting thing. Yorad Yaradnu Yiridi Hilonu, Regilim Ayinu Lefanes Acherim, Achshav Anotzichem Loch. So that's a Pashta Pshat. Rashi is explaining what does it mean, Yorad Yaradnu, that they had to come down, but it means they had a descent. And this descent is on every single level. They realize something's going on over here. That they're having such a descent, they have to go through this whole experience. That's also part of the descent. Anyways, but then afterwards, it says when Yosef finally meets Binyamin, what does the pasuk say? This I'm going to say something I hope no one's going to take it in the wrong way. The pasuk says that when they met up, they had a suda, and the pasuk says V'yisa Masis Meis Panov Aleim V'ateirev Masis Binyamin Masis Kulam Chomish Yodos Vayishtu vayishkiru imoi. They drank and they imbibed with him. And Rashi says, vayishkiru imoi. They imbibed with him, which means that they got shikr. Shazish state in the pasuk. And Rashi says, umiyom shemachru, but from the day that they had sold him, leishosu yayin. They did not drink wine. V'leihu shosu yayin, nor did he drink wine. V'oisa yoim. But that day, shosu they drank. So over here we have an unbelievable lesson. That since this was the first time that Yosef was reunited with his full brother, Binyamin, so it was Hine Matoivu Manoyim Sheves Achim Gam Yochad. As alle Brüder sitzen zusammen, das Asibev Zogen L'chaim und Asach L'chaim. And the Rebbe spoke many times about Chassidische Farbrengens. And the Rebbe said clearly, there are people that talk about Farbrengens and they say, the Eike from the Farbrengen is what comes out from the Farbrengen. The main thing of the Farbrengen, Chassidic gatherings, is what comes out of the Farbrengen. True, that's better, that's a bigger bonus, greater dividends. But the Rebbe also said clearly, and this is very again now, in Shnas Hakel, the Rebbe spoke clearly, there's a sikha where he said that there is an inyan of Hine Matoivu Manoyim Sheves Achim Gam Yochad. Even the mere fact that brothers, Yidden, get together by a Farbrengen and they make good wishes and they say L'chaim, L'chaim, L'vracha, one another, and wish each to the other, Bon L'chaim Mezoyne, and give brachas, for that alone, and that in itself, without other outcomes, is already itself an accomplishment of a Chassidish Farbrengen. So that's a tremendous hurrah. And we take it from, you could say this is the source, that when Yosef was reunited with his brothers, they all drank and they got shikr, even though the brothers didn't know that it was Yosef. But nevertheless, we have to look at the event. Let's take a bird's eye view, and we look at the inyan and what's it that they were reunited, and they said L'chaim, and they had a Farbrengen. So now we see what Parshas Mikeitz is about, fixing your relationship with your brothers. Anybody who's out there that has issues with some other people, make a achlota from Parshas Shavum, daf leben mit der Zeit, to repair it. This is the connection to Chanukah. In Chanukah, it says there was a latkis oven. There was one evening where it was Hini Mateiv Manoim Sheves Achim Gam Yochad. And also the Rebbe brings down from the Rambam, where the Rambam says that the Sudas of Chanukah are Sudas mitzvah. So there's an emphasis in Chanukah of a Sudas mitzvah. Suda means when you have other people there too, a mezumin, etc. So we see in Chanukah there's the union of getting together. And this is the connection to Chodesh Tevis. We spoke about this other times. Chodesh Tevis has the day of Asara B'Tevis. And we all know the Rebbe Sicha Asara B'Tevis. We spoke about this already once, that it's a day where the Eibishter gave us another day, an opportunity to repair the Avos Yisrael. The Churban came because of the opposite of Avos Yisrael, and the idea that there was a siege meant that we all had to get together. Ilu Zachinu, we would have learned the lesson, we would have improved in Avos Yisrael, and the whole Churban wouldn't have came about. There wouldn't have been a Shiva Asa B'Tammuz, there wouldn't have been a Tisha B'Av, but we didn't take the lesson. But here we are, Shabbos Chanukah, Shabbos Mikeitz, Shabbos Chodesh Tevis, and we're taking the lesson. And what's the lesson? The lesson is that we have to make hachlotas, especially in the Shnas Hakel, hachlotas of the togetherness, hachlotas of strong family unit, hachlotas of making class reunions, become, like the Rebbe said, a Hakel Yid. This year we have to study more and more about being positive with others, smiling to others, giving brachas to others. And this is the lesson that we take from Yosef and Yaakov, that they became stronger and closer more than ever. That when we'll see in Parshas Vayigash, and he repeats it again in Parshas Vayichi. Yosef was totally, unbelievably warm and gracious and forgiving and nice and full of Avos Yisrael to his brothers. And what they accomplished in Mitzrayim was greater than what they accomplished in all the years before. So the Eibush shall help him that through our Isaf and Avos Yisrael, and we take all the lessons that we spoke about today, this will definitely finish the Golus, and this will bring the Gula Mitzvah Shleima, take it from Yad Mamish, posting from my home, Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, your man in Melbourne. Good Shabbos, a freiliche Chanukah.